We live in a world where 40 million children under the age of 15 suffer from abuse and neglect. 246 million children are laborers, and 27 million people are enslaved in the human trafficking industry. We are abused, neglected, and discriminated based on our race and sexuality, and suppressed because of our gender. We are objectified, manipulated, and taken advantage of. And we exist in a reality where our fundamental and civil rights are constantly violated. And instead of preventing this from happening again and again, we have so-called experts discussing the importance of the rights of a piece of metal bound together by wires and plugged into a socket. Fast forward into 2030, and I would probably be in a lot of trouble for saying that. A form of verbal abuse, they would call it. My name is Shanelle, and I'm a human rights activist. I believe that regardless of our race, gender, capabilities, and sexuality, that our rights should be fulfilled and respected. That is, if you are made of flesh and blood, of course. For me, the fact that there are people off in the USA and UK discussing the importance of the rights of a piece of metal was rather amusing. And why is that? Because we don't live in a perfect world yet. We don't live in a utopia. There are still some countries that live in a dystopia. No. The world is not full of rainbows and unicorns and sprinkles falling out of the sky, although we would like that. But instead, it consists of people getting raped, people getting abused, assaulted, and locked into detention camps. There are people in our very own country who face various social injustices because, for instance, they're a woman, a Muslim, or Tamil. And that just goes to show how much there is to do to improve our lives, and that much needed change is required. For instance, we're yet to achieve a world where there's zero hunger and zero poverty, where there's education and healthcare for all, and where there's economic growth. And I do believe that technological developments help us achieve this to a certain extent. For instance, the International Telecommunication Union's Fast Forward Progress Report highlighted the importance of artificial intelligence in protecting wildlife, which is the 15th Sustainable Development Goal. And then you have organizations such as the World Bank using a 3Bs approach, which involves a technological integration into developing countries to boost development by providing various economic opportunities. And that's fine, that really is. But the problem is, once these humanoids and scraps of metal become an integral part of society, what happens to us? Will their rights be prioritized over ours? Will they be given the spotlight, and will we be neglected? This situation is much like leaving the answer to a question in a paper half-written and moving on to the next question, but failing to complete that half-written answer due to time constraints. None of you all who sat for your exams was ever able to complete that half-written answer. And none of the developed countries in the world who shift their focus to robo-rights will look onto the world and little countries like ours if they start prioritizing robo-rights. So that brings us to this question: what is robo-rights? Robo-rights is a concept that states that we all have a moral obligation towards machines, and that these robots have rights just like us humans and animals do. So these rights could be simply limited to being able to exist in society and fulfilling your details, or it could go as vast as having the right to life and liberty, the freedom of thought and expression, and equality before the law. And that pretty much devaluates the existence of rights because, come on, a piece of metal getting rights? That sounds pretty ridiculous. Just give it 10 to 20 years, and for all we know, you might have a court case filed against you by a robot. Now, imagine the judge's verdict stating that you're guilty of abusing a robot's rights. Sounds pretty ridiculous, right? And the possibility probability of the case falling on the robot side is really high, because for all we know, they might just start shouting "exterminate" like those Daleks in Doctor Who and shooting at random people. So this entire scenario is pretty ridiculous. And it baffles me that the European Parliament actually dedicated a section to robots in their resolution back in 2017, where they discussed things like robot marriages. Come on, people. We should be talking about the marriages of people in the LGBTQ community, for instance. But we have people talking about two pieces of metal coming together and falling in love, which is ridiculous. And then we have humanoids like Sophia, who were invented in 2016, who even went on to talk at UN-recognized forums and talk shows, and apparently has more emotions than your ordinary woman. So, what if more humanoids like Sophia are created? What if a mass number of programmed yet sentient beings are created? What happens to us? In the words of Elon Musk at the South Tech conference last year, AI is far more dangerous than nukes. So we all know what weapon Kim Jong-un will be using in a couple of years. The fact of the matter is, I am not going to stand for a piece of metal, and neither should you. Because you know what? We are human. We are made of flesh and blood. We eat, we drink, we survive. We walk, we talk. We smile, we cry, we get angry, and we fight. That is what makes us human. And I'm not going to let a robot take the spotlight, not until I and all of us get the spotlight we deserve. So the question is, how do we prevent this dark prediction from becoming a reality? In the face of a westernized and industrial transformation, we need to ensure that our rights are fulfilled and upheld. And a problem that exists at present is the fact that although we are equipped with certain rights, we don't exercise them fully. For instance, how many of you actually exercised your freedom of speech and stood up for that person in your classroom or the person in your workplace who was discriminated? Can I have a show of hands? Very few people, right? And you know why? It's because you are afraid of the dire consequences that would follow. But the simple truth is, the more you and I keep quiet, the more we're going to get trampled on. Take the child in your classroom who is discriminated because they were of a different race, or because they had likings that were different from yours. Imagine that you had actually stood up for that person. It would have brought awareness to the people around you about how important the rights of that individual is, because you are taking a risk and standing up for that person. So that just goes to show that even in the future, when scraps of metal and things made out of binary numbers become a thing, you need to stand up and speak up for yourself. And more than an individualistic approach, I believe that it is our responsibility to also urge the governments and international organizations that do have an important role in our country to take a stand and put our rights first and not the rights of a scrap of metal. If you have to grab a pen, write a letter, sign a petition, go hand in hand with international organizations and just make it aware that you come first and not just a machine. And today, the most commonly used platform for communication is social media. So why not take advantage of that? Think of the last time you used your phone. It might have been in the morning, it might have been an hour ago, or it even might be now as I speak. The point is, as you scroll through Instagram and Facebook and whatnot, you come across various posts from various people. So just take the time off and share a post that's been uploaded by any UN organization that talks about the importance of human rights. Because although a different user might just see it for a second or two, it is bound to linger in that person's mind. And that can even lead to change that is much needed. If you have to pick up a sign, walk on the streets, run around with your fists in the air and shout, do whatever you can. Because it took years and years for women to get the rights that they are entitled to. And even in certain countries, it took years for the LGBTQ community to get what they deserve. So I don't know about you, but I am going to fight for the rights that we are entitled to. Because at present, we are making progress. So let's not let something as insignificant as the rights of a robot prevent this from happening. Because at the end of the day, it's going to boil down to two things: robo-rights versus human rights. And it's essential that we make sure that our rights are upheld. So put in effort. Put in effort every single day if you have to, because that is when the transformation begins, and that will lead to change. Change for the betterment of the world. Thank you.